Today's story is titled, I Finally Moved Out of My Parents' House, Something Followed Me, Part 2, by Fixel1. The link to the story is in the description below. Please enjoy. I didn't open the door. I know that probably sounds obvious, but it didn't feel like it at the time. When I heard that voice, something in me just locked up. I didn't panic or scream, but I wasn't thinking clearly either. I was just frozen, with my hands still on the lock and every muscle in my body refusing to cooperate. It truly felt like if I moved even slightly, whatever was on the other side of the door would know. I stayed like that for maybe 10 seconds. Time really does weird things to your mind when you're listening for a sound that doesn't come. I decided to look through the peephole again, and what I saw was the same empty hallway of a minute earlier. No footsteps on the ground, no sound of someone walking away, no neighbors laughing because they got the wrong apartment, no elevator opening, nothing. Just the same narrow hallway under the weak yellow light, looking exactly the way it had looked before. I remember stepping back from the door very slowly, like I was trying not to startle it, like it would have bitten me if I had moved too carelessly. I know I sound insane, but if you've ever been afraid of something you couldn't see, you know the logic changes a little. You stop thinking in terms of what makes sense and start thinking in terms of what feels safest. And opening that door at that time did not feel safe. I didn't sleep after that. I sat on the edge of my bed with the lamp on and my phone in hand, like I was waiting for permission to call someone. I scrolled down to my mother's number a couple of times and had stopped myself from calling. What could possibly justify waking her up in the middle of the night? I couldn't think of a version of the conversation that didn't immediately make me sound like a child again, scared of some imaginary monster that appeared when the nightlight wasn't on. Hi, Mom. I know I moved out 3 days ago and ignored half your calls, but I think the thing I used to swear took Leo just came to my apartment and asked me to let it in. There are some sentences you just can't come back from. So instead, I gave up on sleep and did what people do when they are trying very hard not to lose their minds. I tried to rationalize it. It was an old building after all, with strange acoustics that whined with every small movement. Being half asleep didn't help much either. The stress of the move, memories of days now past, the flashlight, the fact that I had spent the evening digging around in childhood things I should have thrown away years ago. I told myself that it was my fault, that I'd worked myself into a kind of state where your brain hears one thing and delivers another. Pipes knock, someone's TV leaks through the wall, and the mind does the rest. I even managed to make myself believe it. When the morning sunlight came, it helped. You see, that's the embarrassing part. Daylight has a way of making nighttime fear look exaggerated. All the ghost stories that haunted you when it's dark outside feels just like the lucid dreams of a feverish kid. So, after a couple hours of pretending to be asleep, I got up, made bad coffee, and opened the front door, expecting something to still be there. Something that had waited the whole night for me to finally step outside and I don't know what exactly. I'll admit it. The only thing that I feared more than a childhood nightmare coming back to say hello was the fear that almost after 24 years of staying sane, I was finally starting to lose it. And so I looked for some proof that I hadn't just imagined the night before. Something solid that would prove I wasn't crazy, so I could finally start panicking, crying, and screaming around the room, condemned to a slow and painful descent into despair. Mud, footprints, scratches, anything at all. But the hallway looked normal. The carpet was still as ugly as the day before, and the air smelled like bleach and stale heat. if anyone had been standing outside my apartment in the middle of the night whispering in my dead brother's voice, he had put his best efforts into deleting every trace of it. For a while, that almost made me feel better. I told myself I had probably dragged half the story up from somewhere old and ugly because I'd been sleeping badly and thinking too much. That the voice had only sounded like a child because I already had Leo in my head, and that line, "open the hatch," was just too weirdly specific to be a coincidence, and the brain is way too good at being weirdly specific at times. So I kept repeating that to myself over and over, staring at the flashlight on the kitchen counter, like it was personally responsible for everything and now had to pay for its sins. Mission control. I still don't remember packing it, and somehow that bothered me more in the daylight than it had the night before. I wonder if my mother did it. She was always the type of person who made things worse without meaning to. I blame her a bit for it. I know it wasn't her fault, that she always pretended we could go back to a state of perceived normality after everything had happened. But even right now, after I finally managed to step outside and find my own place in the world, she was there, reminding me of my past and that I could never get over it. "Speak of the devil," I murmured with a chuckle. My mother was calling me. I let it ring twice before answering, mostly out of habit. "Did you sleep?" she asked, and not in the casual way people ask that, in the checking way. "Morning, Mom. No, I didn't." "You sound tired." "Thanks." She ignored that. "Did you remember to eat?" I wanted to tell her, looking for some sort of maternal comfort, as if telling her would somehow make it go away. I could feel it sitting at the back of my throat, heavy and stupid. Maybe if I just said it outright, the whole thing would have been different. Or maybe not. Maybe this was always the way it was supposed to go. So I confessed. "Someone knocked on my door last night." She didn't answer. No confusion, no surprise, just her soft breathing over the line. I could practically hear her, through the phone, weighing every possible answer, what to say, what to do, before very calmly resorting to a simple, "Did you open it?" Like it was obvious what we were talking about, and it probably was, but at the time, it truly felt like she had reached through the phone and put a hand around my spine. She didn't ask who it was, whether I was okay, if I had called the police, if some drunk had gotten the wrong apartment, or if one of my neighbors was messing with me. She only asked if I opened the door, half worried, half scared. "No," I answered. Another silence, this time even quieter than before, if possible. "Did it say anything?" My grip on the phone tightened so hard, my hand hurt. I let a chuckle escape me, disoriented and confused, but mostly resigned. Because sometimes, when you're suddenly scared of someone you're supposed to trust, your body doesn't know what else to do. "What do you mean, did it say anything?" I cried. My mother exhaled too fast. I heard movement in the background, then my father's voice, too muffled to make out. "Mom?" "Were you asleep when you heard it?" "No." "Did you look through the peephole?" How did she know? "Yes." "And?" "There was no one there." She didn't answer right away, as if looking for confirmation somewhere else. But when she did, her voice had careful flatness, like she was afraid of saying the wrong thing. "Keep the hall light on tonight." And that was it. No reassuring words, no comfort for her distressed kid. Just another stupid command, another rule to add to the all-too-long list of pre-existing ones. I wish I could tell you I pushed harder, that I fought back, asked the right questions and demanded real answers, that I forced her to be honest with me for once, Instead, I stood there again, in my kitchen, barefoot, angry, and on the verge of tears. Suddenly, I was 8 years old again. I finally broke the silence that seemed to last ages. "Why are you talking like this?" I asked. "Why do you sound like you already knew?" "Honey, we didn't know anything," she said too quickly. "We?" My father came on the line then, as if he had predicted that from there on, things could only get worse. "Listen to me very well," he said. No hello, no transition, just a shaky voice that I knew way too well. "If anyone knocks tonight, you must not open the door. Are we clear?" I don't know what expression I had on my face while he was talking, but I remember staring straight at the dead flashlight on the counter like it was the one at fault, and I had hated it for that. "What's going on?" "Nothing." "Dad?" "We told you when you were little not to answer doors after dark." "That wasn't normal," I said. "That wasn't a normal rule. What can even—" "It was a rule for a reason," he barked. There it was. That was as close to an explanation as I had ever gotten. "A reason like what?" I asked again. And at this point, he had said the same thing people say when they have decided for you that you are not stable enough to hear the truth. "We'll talk when you come by this weekend." I didn't even realize how angry I was until I heard myself answer, "I'm not coming back there." That got another silence, a different one this time. Then my father said, "Keep the light on," and the call ended. I stood in my kitchen for a while after that, phone still in my hand, trying to decide what was worse, the possibility that my parents had spent years lying to me about something real, or that it had finally come after me, and they couldn't do anything to stop it. It took me a while to calm down. I kept thinking over and over about the call, the night before, and my parents' behavior. I got angry again, thinking about all the rules I had to put up with growing up. "Keep the hall light on. Call if you hear knocking. Don't leave windows open after dark. Don't stand looking outside too long," I muttered mockingly. When I was a kid, those rules had just been a part of my life. But now, as an adult, feeling like they were still piling one upon the other, suffocating me in these four walls that I had pretended until a few minutes earlier were my new beginning. That is something I couldn't accept. But what could I do? My parents never really needed a reason to be weird, and for how annoying, arbitrary, and impossible to argue with they were, I could only just shut up and obey them, like I was doing right now. And so I stood defeated in my own new realm, out of the frying pan and straight into the furnace, until it hit me, while thinking about the words of my father on the phone. Or maybe it had done many years ago. I was now just remembering it. Those weren't normal rules for a child. Those were instructions, the kind given to someone before deployment if he wanted to survive. And did I? I spent the rest of the afternoon trying not to think that. I did my laundry, ate something, and then went out for groceries. And mostly to prove to myself that I could, I walked farther than I needed to, bought things I didn't really want, and took the long way home, even though one of the bags was cutting into my fingers. The whole time I kept waiting for the feeling to pass, that prickling, watchful sort of tension I used to get when I was younger and trying not to look at dark windows. It didn't pass. Back at the apartment, I put everything away slowly, as if keeping myself busy with stupid little tasks means I wouldn't have to acknowledge how badly the phone call had shaken me. I started listening to my surroundings, way too aware of the situation I had found myself in. Listening in the way you do when you're trying to tell whether a sound is part of the house or something waiting just beyond it. That realization made me furious at my parents, at myself, and especially at the fact that a single sentence whispered through a closed door and one awful call with my parents had managed to pull me back into a version of myself I thought I had outgrown. So around 5 o'clock, mostly out of spite, I went to the front door and switched off the hall light. I stood there with my hands still on the switch, staring through the peephole into the dimmed hallway, waiting for the building to prove me right. And yet, nothing happened. I almost felt triumphant, as if after many years I had finally conquered my own fears. But then the terrifying sensation came back, as fast as it had left. When on the other side of the door, something tapped once, like it was announcing its presence. It wasn't the same knock as the night before, just one light tap, low down, like someone testing if the wood was real. I jerked back hard enough to hit my shoulder against the wall. Frantic, I tried my hardest not to let my legs give up on me, but I didn't succeed. I fell on the floor and stayed there for far too long. By the time I finally forced myself back to my feet and looked through the peephole again, the hallway was empty, because of course it was. I turned the light back on immediately, and I'm not proud of it. Conquering my fears would have to wait another night. Outside was still full daylight, and there was no reason that one sound should have scared me as much as it did, but that was probably the point. It had shown me it was getting bolder, that it didn't have to wait until nighttime to visit me, that the light might not have been the shield I thought it was, and the fact that the other night it waited until I was in bed to approach me was out of pure courtesy. I stayed away from the door after that, but in the end, night came again, faster than I noticed. I know that sounds childish, but that's how I felt. One minute there was still gray in the windows, and the next, the apartment had the ceiling off dark around it that makes you feel like the whole world has narrowed down to walls, silence, and waiting. I checked the lock 3 times, made coffee too late, and left the hall light on. Around 11, I finally gave up, got up to brush my teeth, and forced myself towards bed. On the way back, I stopped by the door again without meaning to, out of an old habit. Or maybe I just wanted to check the lock once more, just to be sure it was still there where I'd left it, still locked, as a last line of defense against the unknown. And that's when I looked down. At first I thought one of my grocery bags had leaked dirt. There was a dark smear just inside the door, not big at all, maybe the length of my hand, and with little flecks scattered around it. So I crouched down to take a better look. It wasn't dirt, at least not from something that I would have dragged inside from beneath my shoes, but it wasn't dust either. It was damp, as if it had stood underwater until a few seconds earlier. They were bits of bark, crushed leaf fragments, the kind of black wet soil you get under trees after a cold rain. I just stared at it for a second, because my brain still wanted very badly to believe that all of it was normal, that the mud and undergrowth that had now found its way into my apartment had done so in a casual and easily explainable way. Maybe a maintenance worker had tracked mud into the hallway, or maybe I had brought it in without noticing. But I hadn't gone anywhere near a park, and the hallway outside was carpeted. If anyone had tracked that kind of wet soil through it, there would have been obvious marks. Yet my shoes were clean, the doormat was clean, and the carpet outside my door was spotless. I knew that because, after a while, curiosity got the better of me, and against every sense of self-preservation, I opened the door. There was nothing out there. Everything was inside. I can't really put into words what that did to me. If the voice through the door had scared me, and the call with my parents had unsettled me, this was different. This was the first thing I could actually point to, touch, smell. Finally, tangible proof that it wasn't just in my head, that something was truly at my door. The wet wood and the rotting leaves carried the cold scent of the yard behind my childhood home in the middle of the night. I didn't simply imagine that. I could feel it. I could smell it. And by that point, I was done pretending my parents didn't know more than they'd ever told me. People don't spend years drilling rules like that into a child unless they're terrified of something. And if my mother's voice on the phone had told me anything, it was this. Whatever came to my door last night, it wasn't new to them, and they had lied to me my entire life.